Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. We're doing a deep dive today into, well, the heart of European security, really. The war in Ukraine, shifting alliances. You're living through a moment of significant change, and the decisions being made now, they'll echo for decades. We're going to unpack the recent escalations, Europe's push for more defense autonomy, and also some of the really unexpected ways Ukraine is fighting back.
Absolutely. And we'll be pulling insights from some solid analysis, CPRI, the European Parliament, plus battlefield reports from places like the War Zone, AOAV, AP News, and data from the Kiel Institute, too. Our goal is really to cut through the noise, help you understand the complex forces at play, and what it all means for global security going forward. Okay, let's get started.
Right. Let's begin with the immediate pressure Ukraine's facing.
Yeah.
Just recently, July 9th, 2025, Russia launched what people are calling its biggest long-range drone and missile attack of the whole war. I mean, we're talking an unprecedented number, 741 targets. That included 728 drones, over 300 of those Shahids, the Iranian suicide drones, and 13 missiles hitting places like Lutsk in the northwest, near Poland, and the Kyiv region.
Yeah. And that attack on Lutsk, it's significant because it's a logistics hub, right?
Yeah.
And it's only about 125 miles from the Polish border.
Exactly. It got so intense that Poland, a NATO member, had to scramble its own jets just to protect its airspace. And here's where it gets really interesting. This huge barrage. It came just hours after U.S. President Trump had pledged to resume weapons deliveries to Ukraine.
But only on a small scale.
Right, a small scale. He mentioned just 10 additional Patriot interceptors specifically. He also sounded pretty frustrated with Putin, saying, we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by him.
Yeah, that U.S. stance is, well, it's evolving, isn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe a bit inconsistent because while Trump signaled aid is resuming, remember there were previous pauses in shipments under his administration.
True.
And the small scale you mentioned, those 10 Patriot interceptors, Ukrainian officials literally called it minuscule. It just underscores how desperate Ukraine is for serious air defense. So this whole back and forth, it really raises questions about the level of U.S. commitment, especially when you look at the data. The Kiel Institute, tracking aid up to April 2025, shows something big. Europe has actually surpassed the U.S. in total military aid to Ukraine for the first time since June 2022.
Wow, really? The first time since mid-2022?
Yeah, we're talking $72 billion from Europe compared to $65 billion from the U.S. It clearly shows Europe is stepping up significantly, shouldering a much bigger part of the financial load now.
Okay, so if Europe's stepping up for Ukraine, what's happening with Europe's own defense? CPRI, that's the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, their latest data on arms transfers tells quite a story. Between the 2015-19 period and 2020-24, major arms imports by European NATO members, they more than doubled.
Doubled. That's huge.
It is. And some countries saw just astonishing jumps, like Hungary up over 1,400%, Belgium over 1,300%, Poland over 500%. Massive increase.
Incredible numbers.
But here's the puzzle, right? Despite spending so much more, their reliance on U.S.-made arms actually went up. It was 52% of their imports in the earlier period and jumped to 64% in 2020-24. So the big question is, why buy so much from the U.S. when Europe makes its own advanced weapons?
That really is the core question here. And there seem to be about three main drivers behind these decisions. First, it's political, simple as that sometimes. Buying U.S. gear strengthens security ties with Washington. You see this a lot with Central European states wanting that closer link.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Second, military wish lists, you could call it. The U.S. offers things like perceived fifth-gen fighters, the F-35s. They're very attractive, even if maybe European fourth-gen planes could do the job. And for certain things like big combat helicopters, there just aren't direct European equivalents.
Right, availability.
And third, and this is a big one, military economic factors. The U.S. buys so much for its own military that it creates huge economies of scale.
So U.S. stuff is often cheaper and delivered faster.
It's exactly. Cheaper and faster than European alternatives, especially if Europe needs to develop a whole new system. Plus, steady U.S. production means spare parts and support are generally reliable for decades.
Okay.
But here's a crucial nuance. The European and U.S. arms industries aren't totally separate. They're deeply intertwined. Supply chains, joint ventures. European NATO members actually make components for the F-35, even though the final plane counts as a U.S. import.
So it's not just about buying American versus European. The lines are blurred.
Precisely. It shows that this push for strategic autonomy for Europe isn't just about switching suppliers. It's about untangling these really deep, decades-old industrial links. That's a much harder, longer-term challenge.
Yeah, I can see that.
And it's not just the U.S. either. We're seeing other players grow their share.
Yeah.
South Korea's arms exports to European NATO states are up 130%. Israel's tripled its volume. Turkey is also getting in the game, though smaller for now.
Interesting. So this complex picture, more European spending, but still heavy U.S. reliance, that brings us to the EU and NATO relationship, doesn't it? Russia's 2022 invasion clearly changed everything for European security and seems to have pushed these two organizations closer. How are they working together now?
Well, what's really interesting is how their roles seem to be complementing each other, especially regarding Ukraine. NATO is still, the bedrock of collective defense. Its main job is preventing the war from spreading, protecting member territory, and that's heavily reliant on U.S. military power.
Right, the military shield.
Exactly. The EU, on the other hand, has really stepped up as a major player, providing the money financial aid, military assistance, and coordinating sanctions. And crucially, the EU has a massive annual budget, unlike NATO, which has limited common funds. This lets the EU directly fund defense projects, like the European Defense Fund for Research and Development.
That's a really important distinction, the power of the purse. And the numbers back it up. EU members' collective defense budgets shot up from about $218 billion in 2021 to $326 billion in 2024.
Huge increase.
And they project another $100 billion on top of that by 2027. Plus all these new EU defense initiatives. EDIRPA for joint buying, ASAP to ramp up ammo production.
Right, part of that broader European defense industrial strategy, E2C.
Yeah, and those big plans like Rearm Europe, Readiness 2030.
Yeah.
They even have this $150 billion loan thing called SAFE and a white paper laying out priorities from air defense to just moving troops around more easily.
So there's definitely been huge progress, lots of declarations, lots of initiatives. But there are still persistent challenges, let's be real.
Like what?
Well, political tensions haven't vanished. The issues between Cyprus and Turkey, for instance, still mess with things like intelligence sharing and proper joint planning between the EU and NATO. And there are strategic differences, too. The EU's push for strategic autonomy. Well, some allies, including the U.S., sometimes worry that it could undermine NATO's central role.
The classic tension.
Exactly, and operationally. The EU still heavily relies on NATO, especially American assets, for the really big stuff. Nuclear deterrence, heavy logistics, advanced surveillance.
Which brings us back to the old burden-sharing argument.
Always. The U.S. keeps pushing Europeans to spend more, maybe even up to 3.5% of GDP, just on core military stuff by 2032, plus another 1.5% for related areas.
Wow, 5% total, potentially?
It's a big ask. The European Parliament generally supports stronger EU-NATO ties, focusing on making forces work together better, building resilience, but they also keep stressing that Europe needs to take more responsibility for its own security.
Okay, so while Europe figures out its long-term posture, let's zoom right back into Ukraine's immediate needs. The Patriot air defense system, it becomes so symbolic, but also critically important for protecting cities from those Russian attacks.
Oh, absolutely. The Patriot is, arguably one of the world's most advanced systems for intercepting missiles, ballistic, cruise, the works. Ukraine has received, 6 full batteries and 1 partial one? But they've said they need somewhere between 10 and 25 to really cover their territory properly.
10 to 25, that's a huge gap. So what's the catch? Why not just send more?
Well, the catch is the astronomical cost. These things are incredibly expensive. A typical system runs about $1.1 billion. When they're sold for export, it's more like $2 billion to $2.5 billion.
Okay.
And the missiles themselves. Each PAS-3 MSE interceptor costs around $4 million.
$4 million for one shot.
Yep, per shot.
That's staggering. And it's not just the initial cost, is it? It's keeping them supplied with enough missiles.
That's the critical bottleneck. Production by Lockheed Martin and Raytheon is increasing maybe 500 PAS-3 MSEs this year, 2024. But given the sheer volume of Russian missiles and drones, it's just not enough for Ukraine's needs. We've heard reports from Ukrainian officials about running out of interceptors at really critical moments.
Right.
So while the Patriot is strategically vital and a huge symbol, its limited coverage area and that extreme cost, it just can't be the whole answer for protecting the entire country.
So if the Patriots are essential, but too few and too expensive, how is Ukraine responding to this relentless air assault? It seems their answer is becoming increasingly bold, these deep strike drone attacks inside Russia itself.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting strategically.
And these aren't just random hits, are they? It looks like a calculated campaign covering a huge area. You mentioned something like 500,000 square kilometers, bigger than France.
That's right. It's a massive area of operations.
Oh, yeah.
And they seem to be fighting smarter, going after the absolute core of Russia's war machine. Recent attacks, for example, hit the Lukovsky air plant near Moscow. That place assembles MiGs, modernizes others, and critically is apparently involved in making the Shahid and Jiran drones Russia uses against Ukraine.
Hitting them where they build the weapons used against them.
Exactly. And reports suggest real damage, collapsed walls, and exploded compressor station. That's going to cause serious delays for Russia, especially since they're already struggling with parts due to sanctions.
And there was another major target, right? The drone factory.
Yes, the Kronstadt facility in Dubna. This is like Russia's flagship drone factory. They build their high-end Orion and Sirius combat drones there, the ones needed for long-range surveillance and precision strikes.
So taking that out really hurts their eyes in the sky and their coordinated drone operations?
Significantly, yes.
Yeah.
It impacts their ability to see the battlefield clearly and direct attacks.
And they're going even deeper than that, hitting places like Tula.
That's right. The Pularsky district in Tula is home to 3 really key weapons factories. They produce everything from precision-guided weapons and anti-tank missiles to rocket systems, aviation rockets, thermobaric stuff, even Panzer S-1 air defense systems, which Russia needs to protect its own assets.
So it's not just about blowing things up, it's strategic, crippling the industry by targeting factories making rare, vital components.
Precisely. Things like specialized ignition systems, specific semiconductors needed for missiles, chemical fuel additives, even components for other air defense systems like the TOR-M2.
These sound like bottlenecks in their production chain.
They very likely are. And some analysts are saying these attacks are creating generational problems for Russia because much of their factory machinery is Soviet era. If it gets damaged, they often lack the parts to fix it. Rebuilding could take decades, literally.
Decades, wow.
And just to add a really unsettling detail that shows the kind of chaos these strikes cause, after some of these recent drone attacks deep inside Russia, Russian air defenses apparently almost shot down a civilian airliner, a Belarusian plane. They mistook it for a Ukrainian drone.
Oh my God. That's terrifying.
It is, and unfortunately, it kind of fits a disturbing historical pattern for Russia. Think Korean Airlines 007 back in '83, or Malaysian Airlines MH17 in 2014.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the European Court of Human Rights just recently ruled Russia was responsible for downing MH17.
A grim reminder. What an incredibly complex picture we've unpacked today. We've really seen Europe stepping up its commitments to Ukraine and its own defense in ways we haven't seen before. But at the same time, they're wrestling with uncertain U.S. commitments and the huge challenge of achieving real strategic independence.
It really leaves us with a crucial question, doesn't it, for you, the listener, to think about. You've got Europe pushing harder for self-reliance and defense, and you've got Ukraine showing it can hit Russia's war industry deep inside its own territory. So how might these two things fundamentally reshape the long-term balance of power in Europe? And what could future alliances and security strategies even look like?
That's definitely something to mull over. We've peeled back a lot of layers today on Europe's security landscape. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive on the Global WarWatch Network. If you found this discussion insightful, please do like, share, and subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network wherever you get your podcasts. And we genuinely want to hear what you think. Please leave us your thoughts in the comment section below.